Hello and welcome to episode 90 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. Before we move on to anything else, let's just stop to appreciate how awesome it is that we've made it to 90 episodes of the podcast. While I have some ideas floating about how to celebrate the big triple-digit milestone in a few months, I'm so proud of everything we have done for more than a year and a half. On the show today, Sarah says we'll be back to cover a topic that we interrupted over a month ago, and we're just getting back to it. In episode 84, which originally aired on September 8th, Sarah and I talked about what rides are the best to rope drop at Disneyland Park, Disney's California Adventure, and Magic Kingdom. Rope dropping is the process of getting to the park before it opens for the day to try to rush to get in line for a premier attraction with a lower wait time. After we covered those first 3 U.S. Disney parks, we had to take a break from the conversation to talk about the D23 Expo announcements for both Walt Disney World Resort in Florida and Disneyland Resort in Southern California. That took us 5 episodes because there were so many announcements. Now, Sarah and I will cover Epcot, Disney's Hollywood Studios, and Disney's Animal Kingdom. After that, Disney made some people quite upset with the announcements of price increases, especially at Disneyland. Marissa from Chicago will be back on the show to talk about what we think the increases mean for the parks, and we will talk about some recent news that actually really excited her. Before any of that, we have just a little over 2 weeks left in my fundraiser for Casa of Pinellas County, Florida. Back in June, I walked Ireland's National Famine Way to raise money and awareness in the fight against domestic violence. I'm asking that today you donate $20 to CASA in honor of my pilgrimage. Go to casapinellas.org/walkwithrick/ That's CASAPINELLAS.org/walkwithrick/. This past Saturday, I was on the podcast Let's Break the Silence with Angeline Mitchell in an effort to continue to promote my fundraiser for CASA. Here's a quick clip from that interview.
This is coming from Candace. So is your family okay with you talking about this? I was abused, but my family would be embarrassed. So that's a good question.
Candace, that's a very good question. Half of my family is incredibly proud of me and is very, very supportive of me. And the other half, I don't talk to them anymore, and I don't care what they think. So my mother's side of the family has been very, very supportive of me throughout my life. And I will say that everybody has their ups and downs. And I don't know if necessarily when my mother was going through that situation, if she felt comfortable telling that side of the family that it was happening. I don't know if she always felt the same type of support that I felt, but that's how abusers work, isn't it? They try to make you think that you can't reach out to family, that nobody will support you. I know I'd had that conversation with my mother before where when it first started happening and I was a little baby and we were living in a different state than most of our family, and my mother being in a different state and me being a little baby, and some of these situations where she felt alone and she felt like she couldn't go to her family, and she would get upset about that. And now she thinks, she's like, I could have called my father at any moment and he would have gotten in his car. I could have called my sister and she would have been there in an hour and a half and would have picked me up, no questions asked. But what happens is the abuser is there to tell you that that's not going to happen. And that's one of the reasons we do try to break the silence on these situations. We try to let people know that there are people there who have your back.
Good. That's awesome.
You can still hear that entire conversation at letsbreakthesilence.com/podcast or by going to YouTube and searching Angeline Mitchell. Right now, let's welcome Sarah Says back to the show. We're always happy to have you here, Sarah.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be back. Thank you.
And now we are going to move over to Epcot, which is usually the park that opens last. It's usually the one that opens latest of all the other parks at Walt Disney World. And Epcot is interesting when you're talking about rope dropping because there are two entrances. So that throws a whole nother kink into the system. You can enter by what used to be called Future World, and now it's the neighborhoods in the front of the park. Or you can enter at International Gateway, which is between the French and United Kingdom pavilions in World Showcase.
Does World Showcase still open later than what was formerly known as Future World? Because last time I was there, we had to wait an extra almost hour before we could go into World Showcase. We could only do the rides at the front of the park.
So World Showcase will sometimes open later than the rest of the park, but here's the huge caveat. When that is the case, the rides are still open. So Frozen and Remy's will still be open to rope drop.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
What won't be open all the time are some of the stores, some of the restaurants, some of the movies. That's the issue with the difference. But I'll tell you what, I haven't really noticed that being the case as much, but it could happen with booths and things like that sometimes.
Okay, yeah, because when last time I was there, but this was a long time ago, is they literally had a rope, kind of like they do when you rope drop, and they have it all roped off and you can't move. They had that, so you couldn't even go into World Showcase. So it's nice, but they do have a lot bigger rides in World Showcase than last time I was there. Remy, Frozen, all they had was Maelstrom, and which is now Frozen. I mean, you didn't rope drop anyway. So
yeah,
okay, back to rope dropping.
Right. Epcot is a whole different experience now than when you were there last. So with that in mind, my suggestion for rope dropping Epcot is Frozen Ever After. This is a ride that breaks down more than any other ride on Walt Disney World property. So you want to get there first. You know the kids are going to want to do it. The indoor queue is such a small part of the queue because if it gets backed up, you're outside in World Showcase, which is very, very hot. But the indoor queue at Frozen is very, very cold. So if you can get there, even if you have like a half hour or a 40-minute wait and it's all indoors, that's worth rope dropping it. And another little hack, if they have the bakery open, you can have one person from your party go grab something from the bakery really quickly, and then you can all get in line and have a nice little dessert. So I think that's almost the obvious answer, and it is probably a little easier to rope drop it if you come in the International Gateway side. Now, this next one, I think you're going to want to come in through the front. Test Track. And Test Track, much like Frozen, breaks down constantly. Check the app right now, Sarah. I would be willing to bet. Okay, it is open now.
Yes,
what's the wait time?
It is currently 50 minutes on standby. But you're right. It breaks down all the time. I'm a little surprised that it's at 50 minutes right now.
As a matter of fact, if I were there right now, I would be doing Test Track because 50 minutes is not a bad wait for Test Track. So everybody who's at Epcot right now, hop on Test Track. If it rains, they have to shut it down for the time being, and it rains a lot in Florida. We've already discussed that. And for the time being, it's boarding groups and individual lightning lanes for Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. That is probably going to become a rope drop thing in a few years or a few months maybe, but right now it is not. The third one I have on my list is because A, if you are staying at Boardwalk, the Swan and Dolphin, or the Yacht and Beach Club, and you are entering through International Gateway, I guess this also applies to the Riviera, Pop Century, Caribbean Beach, and Art of Animation, because if you are taking the Skyliner, it drops you off at International Gateway. It is very, very easy to rope drop Remy's Ratatouille Adventure because it is right there in the France Pavilion. It's a new ride. Sometimes that can get really, really big waits, but I do think over the next few months and years, as we have Guardians taking a lot of the attention, Frozen is always going to take a lot of attention. So I think Remy's is going to start dropping with wait time as people have ridden it more. But it's not a bad third option for your rope drop.
What you can do is after you go on Remy, there is this really good bakery. And if it's open, you should go there and get something to eat because it's amazing.
You know what? That's actually not bad advice because that can also get huge lines for the bakery in the France Pavilion.
La Halle Boulangerie and Patisserie?
Yes, that can get gigantic lines throughout the course of the day. I'm going to throw in an honorable mention for Soarin' because Soarin' can get long lines and the queue is boring, but I'm also going to say that the queue is indoors, so you might want to do this in the afternoon after you've walked around World Showcase for a while and you're so hot that you're fighting with your family and you're calling divorce lawyers. So this is a good one to just sort of get out of the heat for a while, ride Living with the Land first, and then get in line for Soarin'. But if you have a long vacation and you're starting a bunch of different days at Epcot, maybe rope drop Soarin'. Moving on to Disney's Hollywood Studios, this is another one with an obvious answer, but maybe not quite as obvious as over at Disneyland Park because there are two other rides that do get really, really long waits throughout the day, but I still think Star Wars Rise of the Resistance is the right answer because of how much it breaks down during the day.
No, that's fair. And it's really far away in the park to get to this, but it does. It breaks down a lot and has a huge wait time.
What is it right now?
110 minutes.
And that's actually not bad for it. So if you get on this right away, that can really, really make or break your day. Now, there is kind of a second choice that also really makes sense, and that's Slinky Dog Dash. If you have a kid who wants to ride Slinky Dog Dash, that could be the big, big ride for that kid. This line gets really, really long throughout the day, and it is all outside in the hottest place in the universe. In a recent episode that aired when I was talking with Marissa from Chicago, I said that people from Toy Story Land probably vacation on the surface of the sun because it is that much cooler. So you don't want to be in line for Slinky Dog Dash at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, it is after 2 o'clock right now. What is the wait time for Slinky Dog Dash?
You ready for this? It's the same as Rise. It's 110 minutes. 110 minutes of standing in the scorching sun with your children. As a parent, absolutely not.
And the Rise of the Resistance queue is almost all indoors. Yes, sometimes it will get so long that you're outside, but you're inside for a long time. You are just baking in the Florida sun when you were in line for Slinky Dog Dash. So consider making this, if it is a priority for your family, making this your rope drop ride at Hollywood Studios. You're going to have to wait for rides at Hollywood Studios. You're going to wait in a lot of lines there. It's one of the problems with that park. So you're not going to get to avoid them. So my suggestion is to figure out what works best for your family, which ride is the one you don't want to wait a long time. The only reason I have it second is because I do love riding this ride at night. And if you're only going to ride it once, I would suggest riding it at night because it is absolutely beautiful. So the third ride we're going to have here is kind of a newer ride. It opened in 2020. A lot of people are still trying to ride this for the first time. It's also a ride that's very popular with the kids, so anybody in the family can do this one. However, as it's been open more, the lines have been dropping a little bit, and that's Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. Sarah, what's it looking like right now at Hollywood Studios for Runaway Railway?
Yeah, right now we're looking at about a 75-minute wait. So definitely significantly less than Slinky Dog or Rise, but still a little bit of a wait.
And this is another one of those that if you're waiting in a longer queue, you're going to be outside. As a matter of fact, at 75 minutes, you'll definitely be outside for a good portion of it. and it gets hot there. Hollywood Studios is a hot park. You want to be waiting outside as little as possible. There's some shade back by Tower of Terror, and then some of that is indoors as well. So you have to take that into consideration when picking what rides you want to rope drop in these parks. It's going to be cooler at 8, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning than it is at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And now we are going to move on to the last Walt Disney World park to open, and that is Disney's Animal Kingdom, opening on Earth Day 1998. And the basic, obvious answer here is heading back to Pandora and rope dropping Avatar Flight of Passage. This line gets long, super long. I have been where the line has wrapped all the way out of the building for Avatar Flight of Passage and down the walkway between Pandora and the Africa section of the park. This has had some lines that have been incredibly nuts, just bonkers lines. What is it right now?
It is currently 85 minutes.
That's nothing for this ride.
Really?
But
Really?
no,
That's so long.
that's still a pretty long wait. But this is a ride with a very cool queue, so waiting for it, if it's not that long, isn't that big of a deal. It's also in a very hot park. Animal Kingdom kind of soaks in all of the humidity, so it's very humid when you're there. So having an indoor queue that has a lot of indoor areas might not be the worst thing in the middle of the afternoon, but 85 minutes is a long, long time to wait. So I will say most people are going to rope drop this, so you're not going to get quite the advantage that you will with some of the other rides that we've mentioned. But if it's important to you, if it's a must-do on your trip, hop on Flight of Passage. It usually doesn't go down like some of these other rides, like Rise of the Resistance or Seven Dwarfs Mine Train or Radiator Springs Racers, or definitely not like Test Track. But what can happen is individual theaters can go down for a while, and if that happens, you can still ride it. Maybe they only have some theaters going, but if that's the case, then it's going to take a long, long time for you to get on the ride because there's just limited capacity. But it usually doesn't go down for the whole day. It's kind of like Tower of Terror, where they're usually always running at least one side of the ride.
Yeah, exactly.
So the ride that I always rope dropped at Disney's Animal Kingdom when I was a vacationer was Kilimanjaro Safari. It doesn't always have the longest line throughout the course of the day. What is it right now, Sarah?
It's not too bad right now. It's actually only at about 45 minutes.
So that's not that bad, but the entire queue is outside. So you want to take that into consideration as well. But one of the reasons to rope drop this has nothing to do with the line, and it has to do with the ride experience itself. We talk about some of these rides being better at night, like Slinky Dog Dash, Radiator Springs Racers, but this ride I have found is the best bright and early in the morning. The animals are at their most active. Sometimes they're still feeding the animals. Sometimes the animals are almost still getting to their regular place for the day. Like they're still wandering around to get to where they want to hang out for most of the day. And you can get some incredible pictures. You can see some amazing wildlife just right in front of you because this is their peak moment throughout the day. When it's 197 degrees in Animal Kingdom at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the people who are waiting right now 45 minutes are not getting a ride that is as good as the ride that the people got who rope dropped it. The people who are about to ride Avatar Flight of Passage are getting the same ride that people are getting at night, are getting the same ride that people get at rope drop. but the people who are riding Kilimanjaro Safari are getting a fundamentally different ride. So I would suggest that for your rope drop.
Yeah, I totally agree. That is always what we rope drop at Animal Kingdom as well. And it's funny because both me and my sister worked at the same zoo. And that zoo actually helped Animal Kingdom put together their habitats. So there aren't fences and things like that are in the way that make your experience so bad, like when you go to certain zoos. But we always go in the morning because animals, like you said, are more active in the morning. They may be more evening is another good time if it cools down enough that they'll be more active. And if you go in the middle of the day, you're more likely to get a ride experience where somebody may camp out in front of your vehicle. And if you've been on Kilimanjaro safaris, they will tell you if they camp out in front of your vehicle, they can't move until the animal moves. And there's nothing that they can do to move that animal. It's not an animatronic. They can't do it. It's not allowed. So you may notice if there is a longer wait time, there could potentially be something camped in front of a vehicle because it is hot and it does not want to move. So like Rick said, it's most active in the morning. You're going to get the best experience, I feel, in the morning on that ride. Unless, like I said, it cools down enough that in the evening when you're there that you can ride it. But then you may not be able to see the animals as well.
Sarah, you are just full of good points because the other thing about that is your wait time getting in line at this time of the day might change.
Yes.
If you get in the queue and it's listed at 45 minutes and an animal decides it's not going to get out of the way of that Jeep for 20 minutes, that's now a 60-minute line. Now, the people who are riding are getting a longer ride, so that's pretty exciting. So if it happens when you rope drop it and you get right on there and then a rhino sits in front of your Jeep for 20 minutes, you've now gotten a better ride and you're not stuck in the queue. So it is definitely a reason to get this one out of the way right away because you can get on it before any problems occur. It is also a ride that closes earlier than the park very, very often. So it might just be good to get this out of the way because you can hop in the Flight of Passage line 1 minute before the park closes and they'll let you ride it. And the third option is definitely the choice of our colleague Marissa from Chicago, who will even go to Disney's Animal Kingdom and just ride this ride on single rider over and over and over again because she is a unique individual. And that is Expedition Everest. This is a good queue, so it's not necessary to skip it. Now, if it does go outside of the building, it can get hot. But as you're going through the queue, the theming is that you're getting higher and higher in elevation. So they make every room cooler than the room before it. So that really helps as you're getting ready for the ride. It's a cool queue. You're going to want to do the queue. If you are the only person in your group who rides roller coasters, like Marissa takes advantage of the single rider line, you can take advantage of the single rider line. So there are a lot of reasons not to rope drop this, but it will get big lines. What's the queue right now?
It is 45 minutes.
That's nothing. If you can wait.
That's not bad.
Yeah, if you can wait 45 minutes for Expedition Everest, that's perfectly fine. But it is definitely something that maybe you want that little pick-me-up in the morning, kind of like we talked about with Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout at California Adventure. You want to sort of shake yourself awake, that can do it.
Well, and having that time as well to stand in the queue, I love the queue for Expedition Everest because I'm just fascinated in general in my life with the history of Everest and the climbing of Everest. And it's a story. It is a cool story as you go up and you're looking at all this stuff. It's like Jungle Cruise queue on steroids. It is so cool. And so, I mean, there's been times because I've rope dropped this ride as well. And there have been times though that I let people pass me because I want to look at stuff and see how cool it is. But I mean, even if you didn't rope drop it and you're going right now 45 minutes, I would just sit there and enjoy one, the air conditioning, because it's probably super hot there right now. And two, the really cool story that you get to follow as you are climbing the mountain.
Before we started recording today, we talked about how we would love sometime to be able to get the three of us, myself, Sarah, and Marissa, all at the parks at the same time sometime, because it would be really, really fun. Here's the deal. I'm not going to Animal Kingdom with you two maniacs because you're letting people pass you in line, and she's riding the same ride over and over and over and over and over again.
I just imagine me and her riding this together, and I'm stopping to look, and she's just grabbing me by the arm, dragging me through the queue, like, we're going again.
And meanwhile, I'm like, when can we do dinosaur? Come on.
And then there's me going, never we're going to do dinosaur. Never. Actually, if you guys did dinosaur, I'd just sit outside with like a soda or something and just be like, I'm going to people watch.
We're making you do dinosaur. Anyway, that is for a different conversation. Sarah, thank you so much. These last 2 episodes talking about the rope drop ride options at both Disneyland Resort and Walt Disney World has been one heck of a fun conversation, because it's always a fun conversation when Sarah's here. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been amazing.
This is Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty, and I'm wasting no time bringing my other good friend Marissa on the show. Thanks for being here, Marissa.
Thanks for having me.
So we had some big news, some controversial news coming out last week from Disney, and we talked about it a little bit, just me talking about it on last week's episode, but I wanted to get some of your thoughts on 2 topics related to the Disney parks. First of all, especially at Disneyland, some pretty significant price increases happening with tickets. A 1-day, 1-park ticket went up about $10 for each tier per day, and a 1-day park hopper ticket went up about $15 each tier. However, they also did create 2 new lower tiers. So it's very confusing. Disney definitely wants all of this to be as confusing as humanly possible. But we have some price increases, and what are your initial thoughts?
I mean, price increases always stink, I think, is just the general comment on them. No one likes them, but at the same time, they're kind of inevitable. You know, the one guarantee you're going to have every year, Disney prices are going to increase. And it's not fun. It's not pleasant, you know, especially for families who have to plan for multiple people and pay for multiple people's tickets. But yeah, it does kind of feel like an inevitable thing. What I think is very funny is they introduced the new tiers, like you were saying, and they just named one Tier 0. Like, what does that mean? What is a 0 tier?
So obviously these new tiers, this 0 tier, as Marissa mentioned, is sort of a little bit of a trick to introduce a higher tier, but call it the previous highest tier, and then introduce a new lower tier. This way they can say, well, we didn't raise ticket prices. The base ticket, ticket 0, is only $4 more expensive, or I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's something like $4 more expensive than the lowest tier previously. So this is their chance to make those premier days more expensive, but make it look like they're not raising ticket prices that much. I did think our colleague, I guess I'll call her, Sarah Says, made a pretty good point. If you are getting a 1-day park hopper for a tier 6 day, like, what are you doing? Like, that doesn't even make sense. That would basically be like Christmas Day getting a 1-day park hopper ticket. So this highest park hopper, the ticket that people are saying, oh my goodness, a 1-day ticket is X amount of money, nobody's buying that ticket. So it is a little bit of fool's gold or bad optics by Disney. I know the argument is that Disney is pricing out the middle class. People say they're pricing out the poor. Disney has priced out the poor. I think people are a little privileged thinking that the poor were going to Disney before this. But the argument that they're pricing out the middle class, yes, it's more expensive. But the average person who goes on a vacation every couple of years, in a recent interview, the CEO, Bob Chapek, said the family from Denver who goes like every 5 years, this isn't going to make a dent in their trip. It's going to be an extra couple $100, but that's not going to be the difference between them going every 5 years or not going every 5 years. I think we generally overreact to these things right away and just keep going to the parks.
Yeah, I think that especially within the Disney community that we're a part of, we see a lot of people saying, well, this is terrible, I'm not going back to Disney, or this is terrible, now I can't take my 5th trip in a year. And it's like, yeah, that stinks, but also in the perspective of like, how lucky are you to go 4 times in 1 year? There's still that like mentality that I try to keep in mind of saying like, okay, maybe I won't take an extra trip, but how lucky am I to still consider it and to go as often as I do? And I think we forget that the majority of people are not going as frequently as we do, or the people that we interact with as much online. Most people are going, like you said, every 5 years. And so they save a little bit more money and they still take the trip. I do think that I think it's easy online to be outraged, especially with a CEO that most people do not like at all. And so I think that it makes it a little easy to complain about everything while not actually changing anything you do.
Yeah, it's almost like on the internet, people say things and don't back it up with actions. But I don't know. We'll have to do a little more research into that later. I do think one of the negatives, at least for a lot of people, how they're viewing the parks right now out of those announcements, is the price increases to Genie Plus. It's going from $20 a day to $25 a day at Disneyland. And now there's sort of a tiered system at Walt Disney World where it could be anywhere from $15, which is what it was before, to $22 on extremely busy days. And of course, they made this announcement right before the holidays when we're probably going to have a lot of $22 days coming up in the future. I think what's going to upset people about this announcement more than the price increases is that it is a doubling down on Genie Plus, which a lot of people do not like.
Yeah, there is a lot of hatred for Genie Plus, and some of it I understand. Not being able to re-ride things isn't great. That I think is a major drawback. But I also think that a lot of people find it extremely helpful. And again, it's one of those things where, as pass holders, we're not going to pay for Genie Plus every day. And it might come off as an extra annoyance for us to be like, now I got to pay for this. But for the people who are taking their family vacation, it's worth it for them. I mean, I've had friends use it and love it and been like, oh my gosh, this was so cheap and it was so worth it. And I'm never going to Disney without it. And that's really the average demographic that I think they're looking at. The dynamic pricing, it doesn't really surprise me. It kind of felt like it was coming. Their tickets are priced dynamically. It just makes sense. They want to cap those sales somehow without actually capping sales, which, I think is the smart thing that they need to do, because you have people complaining that they buy Genie Plus and can only get 3 rides. But I think that this is a step towards them attempting to lower the amount of people buying it each day so that you can get more use out of it. And I hope we see that happen.
And one last thing on this topic. You made a great point last week on Twitter, and I wanted to give you credit for it. Now we have all of these people going back and praising FastPass Plus, which I never had a problem with FastPass Plus, but if you went back in time and listened to podcasts much like this one, it was full of people who hated having to make their decisions 60 days in advance and didn't like how many people were in lines. I mean, there were times where you would wait 15, 20 minutes in the FastPass line, easy, for some of the rides like Peter Pan's Flight or some of those more popular rides. It's just funny to go back and look at how the grass always seemed to be greener in the past with a lot of these things at Disney. And I see a similarity with people talking about the reservation system. And it's so hard to switch days when you're on your vacation or things might not be available. You were making those FastPass reservations 60 days in advance during FastPass Plus, so you were already planning your park days 5-6 years ago, you were doing the exact same thing. So it's just a little bit of overreaction. I'm not saying, listen, price increases are never good, and I am not defending Genie Plus at all. I have never used Genie Plus. That's how much I really don't even want to be a part of the system, but we always seem to think that the older thing was better.
It does always make me a little bit amused to see people who were complaining about FastPass Plus specifically because they hated the long lines and they felt that they couldn't get the rides they wanted because too many people were using the system, and saying that they wanted a way to shorten the lines and to stop so many people from using the system. So then Disney answers and says, okay, well, here's Genie Plus. It's going to be paid, so not everyone will have it, which automatically means fewer people in lines, and we're going to up the ratio of how many people get through on the Lightning Lane. Shorter lines. And they hate it. And they're like, oh, FastPass was so much better. Like, you hated FastPass. What are you talking about? Where did this come from? It's just very entertaining to me. And I loved FastPass Plus. I never had an issue with it. I will say I used a Genie Plus once, October of 2021. Didn't really like it. Felt it was really buggy. I used it recently last month. I got so much done in a single day. We were able to stack rides. I got 7 rides done in like 3 hours because of stacking. It was incredible. So my tune has changed on it a little bit, which was kind of surprising. I was expecting to dislike it, but I didn't hate Genie Plus as much as I thought I would, it was a surprise to me.
Now I want to move on to the positives, an announcement that came out last week, and you're super excited about this. Fantasmic is finally returning to Disney's Hollywood Studios next month. It's coming back in November.
Our nightmare is over. It's back. Oh my gosh. Finally. I wanted to like play the music and have it going do 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 do, but copyright. I don't want to mess with anything on your end. But oh my gosh, the best news. It was definitely released strategically to get everyone a little bit happier after the awful price increases, but
literally the day after the price increase announcement, they announced Fantasmic.
They didn't even try to hide it. They were like, all right, you're all upset. Here's what you've been waiting for. Fantasmic is coming back. Smile, be happy, come visit us. And you know what? I cannot wait. Next time I'm there, I'm going to be doing all I can to see it as much as possible. Who cares about those other shows? Fantasmic is back.
And it's going to be a new version, so there's going to be some unique aspects to see that weren't there before. That's going to be cool as well.
Yeah, I hope we get a few updates kind of in the vein of the Disneyland edition. But either way, I'm excited to see some new stuff. I'm sure it's going to be great. They've been working on it for a while, so I'm excited to see what they came up with. We don't have an exact date yet, but I'll take a month. November's enough for me.
Thanks for being here, Marissa.
Happy to be here.
In honor of Halloween, we have a special episode coming up next week. Sarah Says and I will be talking about the Haunted Mansion. In fact, we will most likely talk about Haunted Mansion at both Walt Disney World and Disneyland, Phantom Manor, and Mystic Manor. We're going to go over some of your opinions about Haunted Mansion and so much more. It should be a lot of fun, and it's happening next Thursday on Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Until then, have a great week.